and welcome to the YouTube stream. Today we'll be discussing everything uh, relating to the French, and I say everything, but there's actually so much theory involved in the French defense that probably we won't even have enough time to cover that in one sitting. And the YouTube streams don't go on for hours. They literally last like 40 minutes to an hour, depending on, how much time we have and how much material we have as well. So I've handpicked a couple games that I've played over the last couple of months, and it probably goes without saying that if you play a lot of chess consecutively, it's impossible to stay sane during that time. JK. So I played 6 tournaments in a row, and out of that came a couple French games, some that I'm really proud of, some that I'm a little bit disappointed about because the opening was super, and then going into the middle game and then the end game, it's either time trouble or making huge mistakes in the position that have then led to my demise. But thank you all for being here, and I hope that these games that we're going to take a look at and my explanation of the games and going through sort of my thought process and yeah, hopefully that can be something you can learn from. So let's jump right in. That's enough pleasantries for now. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessie February. I'm from South Africa, Women International Master, gunning for that Women Grandmaster title. My live rating at the moment's 2052, so really close to 2100 where I can get it as a direct title, and yeah, that's the goal. So the first game that I chose, and I'm going to spoil it for you here, it was a little bit of a heartbreaking result. But this opponent specifically is a grandmaster. His name's Ibrahim. I don't know how to say his first name. Ibrahim Kamran Kulov. And he's from Spain. And I played him in the Pontevedra Masters tournament in July. And that was after spending a whole week in a training camp, where the training camp was basically classes of like 8 to 10 hours of chess every day, and they were all done in Spanish. So you can imagine me and my teammate Anzel, we were busy suffering through these sessions where I was like forcing myself to learn something, and not just the chess, like I was trying to understand the Spanish as well. And going, into the training camp not knowing any Spanish, I felt like, I learned a lot in that week. So now I can count to 8 because there are 8 numbers on a chessboard. I can tell you what the pieces are called, and yeah, I know some other words like enroque and jaque and comer and like all these other nuances when it comes, or chess terms, and crutch words like entonces and vale and claro. So my vocabulary definitely grew, and then I realized I'm probably gonna have to put more effort into learning Spanish if I want to know more than just those words. So Duolingo was my best friend. It still is my best friend. All about that duo streak. Don't want to get threatening messages on my phone. So let's begin. And at this stage in the tournament, I was actually doing quite well. I was very proud of my performance, and I was gaining some rating. So I felt kind of confident going into this game. And I think that confidence was definitely exuding, because the opening was definitely something I can be proud of. In 2017, I spent a great deal of time looking at this particular line in the French. I've been playing the French since I was 13, 12, so more than 10 years now. And I should be a lot further in the French than I am right now. But I used to take my A4 lined book, and I used to write down all the variations that my coach was reading to me from like the John Nunn opening book. I had access to Ribka at the time. I don't know if any of you actually remember Ribka, but I had no idea how to use it. And those programs were super intimidating for me. It was like the first time we were owning a laptop, and I make it sound like I was born in the 60s, but I'm a 90s kid. And yeah, so me and my A4 notebook used to go everywhere together, and that's how I learned how to play the French. So, like I said, in 2017, I was 20 years old, and right before the African Championship, I had a bit of a training. I wouldn't say camp, but about 3 to 4 hours a day. I was working with a coach, and we looked at this line in depth. Well, it's not a line; it's an opening, so it's the Tarash in the French, and this is how the game continued. And I know that after bishop to d3, c5, c3, knight c6, knight e2, and I'm very familiar with this. I've gotten this many, many times online, over the board. So, I felt really comfortable. We're on move 7, and still in theory, right? So, yeah, I decided to take. And before, when I started playing this line in the Tarash, I always played queen b6. But the reason I don't like queen b6 anymore, I'll show you now. So after, castles, takes, and f6, takes, knight f3, bishop d6, and bishop f4. I always preferred, the queen defending the bishop, and there was just this line without queen b6, because I don't ever see the reason why queen b6 is beneficial in that line. Perhaps to put some pressure on b2. I think there was a game in a South African closed championship where I actually took on b2, and then after like rook b1 I took on a2, and it was super dodge. I think the line was like rook e1, rook e2, and to attack the queen, and you need some compensation for the 2 pawns. But I just held on to the 2 pawns, and I won the game somehow. So let's go back. So knight e2, I took, and this is without queen b6, f6, takes, knight f3. And yeah, the plan's the same, right? Bishop d6. And usually there's like castles, and I can castle as well. Or bishop f4, and I can just take. And after knight takes, castle. And this was the position. What I like about castling here is that it does a bunch of things, right? So you're out of the line. On the e-file, you can prepare e5 at some point. Of course, you don't want to break in the center when your king's not safe. You're also indirectly attacking the knight and the other knight. There's so many spicy lines that come from this opening. That's why I love it. Because your opponent will never know what you're doing, right? So, excuse me. Here, it's black's move. So if you know the opening, then you probably know what's next. You can also pause the video to try and guess the next move in this line. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you. I played knight to e4. And now there are a few things that white can do. Taking is not one of them, just because the pawn will take and you're attacking the knight, and white will just lose a piece. But there's also queen c1. There's knight e2. There's knight h3. There's g3. I've seen all sorts of things. All sorts of things. And here my opponent surprised me with g3. And the last time that I saw this move was in fact in 2017 at the African Championship. After training 3 to 4 hours a day for that tournament, I ended up coming tied first, but on tiebreak, I missed out and came third. I did get a World Cup spot, but I narrowly missed out on my Women Grandmaster title, which then was a direct title. All right, so g3. And I think in the game, I played queen f6, and I repeated that move. I can't remember what the correct move was. Well, I couldn't remember at the time. I think in this position you can play g5. What else is available? Maybe g5 is the only move, actually. I think g5, because here, knight g2. and maybe, okay, bishop d7. Though this would freak me out way too much. There's so much air around the king. And after something like knight e3, I wouldn't know what to do. Okay, I suppose bishop e8, bishop h5 are very basic ideas in the French. And this is something that worries me. You know, I play the French and I'm always having this problem with my c8 bishop, yet I'm not doing anything about it. And perhaps I should start playing openings like the Caro-Kann or, you know, not the French. All right, so let's go back to the position that we have here. So after knight e4, g3, queen f6, and h4. And then I just went ahead and I played h6. I think white has like a slight advantage, but nothing more or nothing much to write home about. It's 0.4, it says. I mean, I don't trust chess.com's engine, but I think that's pretty accurate. Bishop takes, and I think if I take, after taking with the pawn, and knight to e5, I can't take the knight, because after pawn takes, queen takes, there's knight g6, and there's a fork on the rook and the queen. So instead, here I played rook to d8, pinning the pawn to the queen, and knight h5. And I'd actually anticipated this move, because after queen f5, I was quite happy. I was provoking g4, and if white wanted to trade queens with queen g4, obviously the pawn on d4 is hanging. I also don't mind just connecting my pawns again if queen takes queen. Well, I suppose in that line there's actually mate on g7 that I have to worry about, so maybe there was something else I was looking at the time. Or maybe takes and then just grabbing on d4. But after g4, I was happy to play queen f8. Now I think the position is relatively equal. And after knight takes, my bishop is like Dobby after receiving a sock in a book. Dobby is free. Dobby's a free elf. And we have the squares b7, a6. You know, a6 is beautiful because of the range. And after rook e1, rook b8, attacking the pawn on b2. And instead of defending it, my opponent just ended up taking on e4. I was still relatively happy here because I get a rook on the second rank. I'm attacking f2, threatening checkmate. So of course you have to do something about it. And after rook to f4, which I also expected, queen to e7, I'm putting pressure on h4, and it's not certain how white is going to defend this pawn. So of course we're out of the opening, it's move 24. But I think that out of the French, we've gotten a very comfortable position with black. Against a grandmaster, my rating 2000, and against almost 2400. I think it's safe to say that the French is not that bad. So I hope that you can agree with me. Yeah. All right, so after queen to c1, it was worrying how many problems my opponent was posing, and honestly thought that it would just be straightforward winning a pawn. But after rook to b6, I wasn't too happy with rook b6. Maybe there was better. Maybe there was e5. I just didn't want to open too many diagonals to my king, is the problem. Queen e3, putting a pin on my queen. I'm just looking at the engine lines right now, rook b5. Okay, this is a little bit too complicated for me. So rook b6, I just wanted to defend on c6 and renew my threat on h4 because it's still not so easy to defend. I think here, okay, e5 was perhaps correct, and after rook to e4, I can just play rook takes, and after takes. I think I'm just supposed to play g6 here. I think g6 is the move. Maybe not? It says c5 is the best. But that is not easy to see. Honestly, I think g6 would have perhaps saved the day. Because after knight g3, I can just grab. Can I grab the pawn? So many question marks. No. Queen c4 check. Oh. You see, endgames are difficult. Study your endgames. Stay in school, guys. Alright, let's go back. Okay, so takes king h7, and now it looks like the turns have tabled. Like, it's really difficult to evaluate this position, and I felt like it went from being in my control to now being completely unclear, and I was just frustrated. And to couple frustration with a position like this was probably not the best thing in the world, because I don't think my time management was so good this game. Or perhaps it was good in the beginning, but then I just end up spending this like unnecessary amount of time doubting myself, thinking, where did I go wrong? How could I have improved? And reminiscing on the past when I should be focusing on a position that is not lost yet and we are still playing the game. Focus on the moment that you're in, you know? All right, so I had to go for check. So I played queen g5 check and I took the pawn with the queen. Maybe king takes was better. I don't know. Was it? No, but king takes is bad because the pawn's hanging. So queen takes, rook e1, and now I have to be so accurate because one slip and I might find myself in a very tricky position. I think just developing my bishop here was the best. Um, what did I play? I played bishop a6. So it suggests maybe bringing the bishop on this side because you really have to defend the king. I underestimated how weak my king was despite the pin on the knight. I don't think that that was like an absolute pin that was going to last too long because, you know, queen's coming, rook's coming, I'm in trouble. Queen can swing across. So there's a lot that can happen here, and I underestimated that. Alright, so I played bishop a6, queen c5, and already you could see that the evaluation bar agrees with me that life sucks. Alright, so the threat is obvious, rook e7, and I just played rook b7 to try and save it, hoping that my opponent would just take the pawn on c6, offering me, you know, an opportunity to somehow salvage this position, maybe playing something like bishop to d3. I would have at least tried. Oh, I didn't even see this move. Queen h1 is so nasty. Wow. If nasty was a move, it would be queen h1. I completely missed that. That deserves like 2 exclamation marks because it's attacking the rook, it's attacking my king. King is forced to move. If I cover with the queen, the rook hangs. So yeah, that's just that's what over looks like. All right, so let's go back. Yeah, this is a very heartbreaking game to go over, but I know we have to rip off the band-aid. You know, even though it's months later, I keep thinking that now is the chance. Here is going to be my first victory or like really good result, you know, against a grandmaster. But I had to hold my breath for a little bit longer. Queen f7 is a blunder, it says. But in this position, what is the correct move? Let's see. It says queen g4 is good, but I'm not convinced. Okay, I suppose you're covering important squares with the queen. Would have otherwise checked the king. And rook e4 would have been played. Queen h3. Okay, all of these moves are like amazing, but very difficult to see, I think. There's just too many squares on the chessboard, guys. Can they just take some squares away to make things a little bit easier? But yeah, the rest we don't have to spend too much time mulling over. Just because, you know, it reached its inevitable end. Yeah. Yeah, there's a mate on h5. And it's over. Unfortunate. It was a really good game. I feel like it was really good. Like at some stage, you know, I was actually better in the position. Maybe with queen after g takes h6. Yeah, it was better. It was like minus 1.5 for me. Maybe even more. But I think this could be a very instructive study. Someone to sit and look at it without an engine and to actually figure things out. Like it's still tricky, but somehow better for black. So yeah, learned a lot from that game. And on to bigger and brighter things. I want to go over a game that I won with the French. And this game was from the World Olympiad that we played in Budapest just a couple of weeks ago. And in this particular game, we played against Belgium. Very, very strong team. My opponent, 2189. And yeah, I think I was. Well, I mean, obviously, I should consider myself in form after having played 4 tournaments, but I maybe not in form. I was in the zone. I was definitely in the zone. I wasn't going to take, you know, I didn't even think about losing. I just thought about it's going to be a positive result. I want to have a good quality game, and whether it's a draw or a win, it's going to be good for the team and it's going to be good for me. And it's a different dynamic playing for your team as opposed to just playing for yourself. Played a bunch of opens and then played a team event. And when you're sitting there and you're like, this is just another chess game, but now I have 3 people sitting next to me and I'm playing for them too. Like, you have to shift your mentality a little bit. Like, whether, you're going in and you have this frame of mind of like, I'm going to destroy my opponent but play super aggressively and make my teammates a little bit nervous when they come across my game. You have to really keep that in mind, but also not let it like distract you or take over your entire brain when you're playing your game. So yeah, I think what I found one of the most important things, um, one of the most important things in a team tournament, I think, is team dynamic. If you get along with your team really, really well, there's a good chance, despite your ranking in the tournament, that you're going to have better vibes at the board. And perhaps your psyche would be better. You're going in as like a force to be reckoned with. And I think that creates an aura that could often intimidate the opponent and could make you play a lot better. So maybe someone can fight me on that your chess prowess is not always the only thing you have going for you when you're sitting at the board in a team tournament, that how you get along with your teammates is just as important. So yeah. All right, so let's take a look. And surprise, surprise, it is French defense as well. And here my opponent played the exchange. And a lot of people have, mixed emotions about the exchange French. Sorry, 1 second. And the reason why they feel like it's perhaps not a great way to go when you're playing white is because it equalizes really quickly. Why people hate to look at it is because it's always considered very drawish. I beg to differ. And in an article that I almost posted today, I was going to write about the whole like psychology of things when it comes to someone telling you that you shouldn't or you can't do something, and then you go ahead and you try to do it anyway. Someone tells me that the exchange French is so boring and not worth looking at. I give them a reason why it is worth looking at. And this game is one of those examples where things can get kind of spicy really quickly. It was a middle game and there were so many tactics. So give me a chance. Don't judge a book by its cover. And this being the book move of e takes d5, I've always wanted to learn queen takes d5, which I know can be very exciting as well. I think c4, knight c3 are the main moves, but okay. E takes d5, and my opponent played knight f3, and I continued with bishop d6 because usually in the exchange French there are different ways of playing. You can short castle, or if you want, you can long castle, with the knight being on c6. The bishop comes out, queen d7, knight e7, f6. Like, it's a system that doesn't always work, and most often black has to short castle anyway, but it gives black a little bit of a chance to Not play the usual c6, knight d7, knight f6, like this. So just shake things up a little bit, because there are several ways of playing, and there's not only, it's not forced. You're not only forced to play one way when it comes to exchange French. But my opponent was definitely telling me here after c4 that they're out for blood. Believe it or not, I was looking at her games online before the match. You prepare. She had a database of games, and I think there were a few games where she played exchange French with c4. And I kept thinking to myself, no, but I'll just take the pawn, and then it'll be isolated, and we'll go into a line that's maybe equal but better for me because there's an isolated pawn. I'll try to exchange pieces, everything by the book that you're supposed to do against an IGP, an isolated queen's pawn. But something stopped me, and I switched on the engine, and I saw something else. And even though I was looking at the engine lines, I'm like, she's not going to play this. Why am I wasting my time? I'm thinking and remembering invaluable, well, not invaluable, I suppose, like things that are not going to happen over the board. And my memory is already so limited. Why spend time? But I did, and for good reason. The engine said knight f6. And that's all I remembered. I think that's where my preparation had stopped. I had briefly taken a look at c5, where the bishop comes back, you play b6, you try to win that way. And then after I saw that it was either equal or slightly better for black, I stopped. Because I know my limits, and I know how little that I can remember, which is probably not something I should be saying on a YouTube video. But I think it is possible to become a decent chess player with a bad memory. And no, you don't have to train your memory with the whole book on how to create a memory palace, which I think is very cool. And I would love to know how to do that. But I just don't think I have the brain capacity right now. Okay, so knight f6. And c5 happened. And so I made myself comfortable, made sure I had a cup of coffee sitting next to me. Of course, we couldn't have any beverages sitting on the table because it was an electronic board, and the rules say that you can't have a beverage sitting on the table in case you knock it over. So I had my coffee next to me, picked it up sometimes, held it in my hand, took a sip, and I felt comfortable. And then I was, for a brief moment, really happy that I took a look at this line, because I knew that bishop e7 was completely fine. Even though you're like, well, that bishop is moving to a more passive square. Why are you happy in this position? And that's because the pawn that was attacking the center has now moved forward and is no longer attacking one of the central squares. And now you've also white has created an opportunity for black to attack that pawn and get rid of one of the central pawns. And as we know, the most important part of a chessboard is the center. And if you can make sure that your pawns or pieces stay in the center or near the center while pushing your opponent's pieces away from the center, that is already good for you. And it's a little bit of a long-term plan, but I was still pretty happy, with the challenge at hand. What's even worse is not having a plan at all. And in the French, that's happened a lot of times where I'm like, well, my pieces are out, now what? And then you have to spend about 15 minutes trying to figure out, what's your next move, or what's your next, because, in the French, if it's not the exchange French, it's very cramped. And with the limited amount of space, you also have a limited movement with your pieces. And if your pieces don't work together from the start, there's a good chance that you'll be completely outplayed from the opening. So that's really, really important to know, and something that I have to spend a lot more time trying to understand. It's piece placement and pawn breaks in the French, which I should know already. So after bishop to d3, which I looked at too, I think it was up to this point, I castle, and b6. And this is where my preparation ended. After bishop to e3, I had to sit and think. And I'm pretty sure I spent a great deal of time here because I thought about taking for so long, But the problem with taking is that after pawn takes, I just wasn't happy with things. I think I took, or no, I didn't take yet. But the reason I wasn't happy is because I've now availed the d4 square for the knight. I'm not entirely sure where to place my pieces, and probably I should have looked at that in the preparation. But I had to get creative. So here I played bishop g4. I thought about it, and maybe in hindsight it wasn't the greatest decision, but there's a lot of logic behind my decision. Number one, I'm pinning the knight, and I was thinking that if h3, perhaps I could just capture the knight, and that knight would be, pretty strong. I can take the pawn, play knight c6. I'd have knight e5 eventually if I really wanted to. I could push the pawn if I wanted to. There's no knight c3, and life's good. So knight b to d2, I was incredibly happy to see, because obviously knight c3 is a better square for the knight. You're reaching for the center, and now the knight's only controlling one central square, and that's e4. So forcing the development of that knight into, a passive square, I think was a win for me. Even though it says knight b to d2 is the best move, I felt like it wasn't. And I'm obviously better than... What engine is this? Stockfish 16. No, I'm not. Alright. I just call it bad intuition. I need to get my gut checked. Alright. So b takes c5, takes a knight c6. And I thought relieving the pressure was a good idea. And this is something I consciously picked up on, that central breaks and exchanges for me are incredibly difficult to figure out. I never know when it's a good idea to take, whether it's a good idea to push, or whether it's a good idea to just create pressure in the center with my pawns. And it worries me because we all know that pawns cannot go backwards. So once you've committed to that decision, you have to stick to that decision for the rest of the game. And that's the thing. It's easier to make, these kind of decisions with your minor and major pieces, just because they can go back in case you feel like you've made a decision that wasn't good for the position and you need to sort of re-maneuver. And that's not possible with pawns. So knight c6. And here I thought that, okay, all my pieces, my minor pieces are developed. All I have to do is connect the rooks, put the rook on the open file or semi-open file, attack b2, and good stuff. And I completely missed queen a4. I saw queen a4 in my analysis after knight c6, but I thought that, now I have to just play bishop to d7. But I think the best move for white here is actually bishop to b5, and it forces me to play queen to e8, or knight to b8, or d4. Okay, I don't like d4 actually. Queen e8 maybe. But it just looks so bad. Queen e8, yeah. So I was really happy to see queen to d1, and here I could just play rook to b8. Which kind of... Yeah, does it stop bishop b5? Well, I suppose bishop... Yeah, oh, it stops bishop b5, but now this plan of queen a4 and bishop b5 can no longer be played. So a3, a5 stopping b4, and queen c2. Right. So prophylactic move, stopping the knight from coming in, stopping the bishop from coming here, and also stopping the bishop from attacking on h7. I thought it was just a all-around really good move. I gave myself a thumbs up. h3, I think maybe she wasn't too sure of what to do, but also to stop me from playing knight g4, it made sense. Just gave me a chance. And here I felt like, okay, I'm coming back into the game. I need to start coming up with plans. And my plan was so bad. But I thought, okay, if I want to improve my position, and I'm not entirely sure how, let's look at the piece that is doing the least and try to put it on a square where it is doing more. And that immediately brought me to the queen. Queen's not doing anything. It's being shielded by two bishops. Very, very overprotected queen, you know. So queen c8, queen b7 is a plan, right? You're attacking b2, what can go wrong? So queen c8, and also I could like tease the idea of taking on h3, though obviously it's not a good idea. And after rook to b1, she also tried to play prophylactically here, saying, you know, you can attack my b2 pawn, but I am defending it so many times. So I played bishop to e6, thinking, bluffing, allowing, if knight b3, I could simply take the knight, right? Not right. Take a look at the whole line. Knight b3 was in fact played. But what happens after rook takes b3? Tell me, is it a good move? Is it a bad move? What should black play? So you can pause the video. I'm not going to pause myself too long. I'm just going to go ahead and show you. But it's interesting. And perhaps I shouldn't have said anything about rook takes b3. But the next one I'm keeping quiet and you're going to have to figure it out yourself. Alright, so after rook takes b3, queen takes, and I had to take a look at all of this, and after d4 I saw queen to b5. Problem with queen b5 here is I would probably have to take the bishop, and after queen takes, play bishop to d5, and now I'm threatening the knight. The nice thing is that after pawn takes, I can take on h3, and I'm really close to the king just to say hello. So there's a lot going on here. We can take a look at that. It didn't happen. But after this, so takes, queen takes, bishop d5, probably queen back somewhere, I don't know, queen a6. I can play bishop b7. I would have played bishop b7, but it says here e takes f2 is best. Okay, bishop b7, queen c4, and bishop takes f3. G takes f3, queen takes. This is what I saw, but apparently it's not the best. Better was e takes f2, rook takes f2, queen takes a6. I would not have gone into an endgame. Bishop takes c5. Oh, I completely missed this. And you get the exchange back, but you're a pawn up. I do like that a lot. I like it. But it didn't happen. So let's go back to the current position, right? So here, instead of queen b5, my opponent played queen c2, conceding, saying, you know what, you can have your two pieces for a rook, that's fine. And I took it. I didn't want to reject her gift. And after rook to d8, I think things were fairly simple. All I needed to do was control the open files, trade pieces where I could, and not slip up. I think that that was the most important plan. And here I was just being a little bit cheeky. I just wanted to attack and provoke e4 because it blocked in the bishop, but also allowed the square for my knight. And now I played knight to d7, attacking on c5, queen to f2, defending it. And right, the engine's going crazy, but I'm going to put the ball in your court. Here it is black to move. You can pause the video. I'm going to continue. So we have queen to b3, yes, and white moves. White plays knight to d4, right. Then we have, yes, knight takes knight, queen takes, and the final blow. Did you see it? Yep. Queen takes c2. This was my most proud moment. If I could show you the evaluation, it says it's a brilliant move as well. I felt really proud because bishop takes, right? And then you can play bishop takes c5. And it's over because queen takes, knight takes, and black is a piece up with no compensation for the pawn. So what a lovely end to that game. And who said the French is boring? Psh. So let me double check how long we've been live right now. So we've been live for 40 minutes, which should allow us, I think it should allow us one more game, right? And I'm going to use this game as an example, but what I'm going to do is not go over the entire game, perhaps just go over, you know, the opening and to a point where I made a mistake. This was the first round of the World Olympiad, and it was South Africa versus China. I played against international master Zuzin. I don't actually Yuzin. I don't know how to pronounce her name, so I'm gonna say she is Miss Song. Yusing? I think it's Yusin. Yusin Song. Yeah. And our team did surprisingly well. I'm not talking about results. We lost 4-0. I'm talking about quality of play. Like, we held them for very long, and the quality of our games were there. We showed tenacity. There was a camera on our boards, just showing, you know, it was one of the top boards. I think it was like board 5. And we were playing against one of the top teams. So we had nothing to lose. But it was also a test of our team dynamic and to see, you know, how strong we are as a team. And I think it definitely set the tone for the tournament. So I was happy with how we performed in that round. I was sad with the loss, but as some would say, it's expected. As long as you learn something from the game. So it was a French, and we have a Tarash, right? So here I decided to take the pawn instead of playing knight f6, just to not go into lines, maybe not go into lines that she's taken a look at. But this is something I had prepared, and after knight to e5, queen d5, bishop. Wait, come back. In this position, I think one of the most common moves here is c3, bishop e2, but here she played knight e5, and I had to think for so long. I had no idea what to do. And I think this is where I spent most of my time. But I played queen to d5, which I loved, because you can't develop the bishop. If you push the pawn, I have check. Like there's a, or perhaps like if c4, maybe bishop b4. Bishop b4 is really, really nice. King e2 is the best move, which is ridiculous. Because otherwise, if bishop d2, you know, I can just take on d4 and take on e5. So there's very little that white can do to attack my queen right now. So I felt like very chuffed with the queen d5 move. It felt creative, you know. After bishop to e3 and bishop d6, I was getting a little bit cocky. And now I think after castles, bishop e2, I should have taken on g2. It was a bluff. I feel like I should have taken, because after bishop f3, I can just bring my queen back. Ah, okay, play queen h3 maybe? Queen e2. This is very difficult though, and then just to trade pieces. Probably against anyone else I would have done that. But I just thought, you know, she's sacrificing the pawn, I shouldn't take it, and it would be just really good for her, and I'm just going to be categorized as a pawn grabber. I should have taken the pawn in hindsight, but I went check instead, and after c3 I played c6 just to allow the queen a square to come back to. h4, knight e5. I was happy to trade the bishop. She didn't want to trade the bishop. I brought the queen back, and after queen to c1, stopping my idea of playing bishop to f4, knight f4, I played e5. It was a good central break. And finally, it's no longer French structure because my bishop has a lot of air and probably doesn't know what to do with all this freedom. Captures. So I was willing to give up my bishop for the knight. And after c4, knight f6, takes, and I felt really nice here. The king's gonna have trouble castling. I can simply play, what did I play here? I played queen to f5. I liked queen f5. Queen f5 was fine. Yeah. And castles. Okay, it says I should have played queen e4 here, but I really wanted to develop my pieces and at least finish my development. So after this, rook e1 and bishop e6 just to attack the pawn on c4, b3, rook d8, and look at my position. Like, all my pieces are doing something. My queen has available squares to escape. Like, everything is really good. And the problem was I could not, for the life of me, see a way forward in this position. It baffled me. I played the worst move on the board, which took my position from equal to not so equal. But it's nice that despite being taken out of my opening preparation, I was still able to get creative enough, and that's a nice thing about the French, because it challenges you. It challenges you to get the light squared bishop out. But this was definitely pleasant, and I was able to talk about an opening I love a lot, and a little bit about the experiences from the tournaments that I played, including the Olympiad and one in Spain as well. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate you all, and yeah, you know, usually I don't do a lot of chat interaction, but I can see the chat, and I appreciate all of you who are able to catch the stream live, and I hope you learned something today. So thanks again. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.